Your life hasn't turned out quite the way you imagined it. Your job? Tedious, demeaning, exhausting. Your coworkers? Incompetent, manipulative, petty, annoying. Your boss? Your boss is a literal pig, chauvinistic, patronizing, abusive. Turns out, capitalism sucks. It's enough to make you want to scream. Introduced in 2016 through a series of 100-minute-long animated shorts, as well as a number of accessories, graphemes, and other merchandise, Aggretsuko would make the transition to full net animation in 2018 and would run for 5 seasons, concluding in 2023. The animated series would explore a number of social ills, exploitative working conditions, toxic office environments, rampant misogyny, and the general malaise caused by the stresses of living under late capitalism, all filtered through the experiences of our protagonist, Retsuko, a 25-year-old red panda, single, female, a Scorpio, blood type A. If the marketing is to be believed, as the plethora of articles written about it attest, the singularly important aspect of Aggretsuko is how much of a departure from previous Sanrio products she is. Part of the same cohort as Gudetama, Retsuko was designed to appeal to young adults who were navigating the stresses of the contemporary workplace. The hook, the core of her subversive function, is that while she operates as the docile and pliant office lady, she manages to squeeze all of her rage into a bitter little ball and releases it at an appropriate time, belting out death metal at her local karaoke bar. It is within these sacred precincts that Retsuko is able to air the grievances of her generation. The aggressive Retsuko shorts are pithy and eminently relatable, mostly comprised of self-contained narratives centered on petty grievances, the mildly annoying foibles of having to interact with exploitative bosses, irritating coworkers, two-faced friends, and an all but absent love life. They are also designed to be consumable in a way that a longer format TV or net animation is not, perfectly capturing the spirit of the Sanrio motto: small gift, big smile. The first season of the net animation fleshes out Retsuko's character and centers the narrative on her numerous attempts to escape the daily grind, quitting her job and helping her friend start a business, using HR to chastise her misogynistic boss, and finally becoming a housewife by getting married. None of these options work out, of course. She can't afford to leave her job while the startup gets off the ground. Her boss's performative kindness creeps everybody out, and the guy she falls for just isn't that into her, a realization Retsuko was made to confront, by her boss no less. And the season ends with her having settled back into familiar patterns, but still tilting towards adulthood. This becomes the thread which binds together all of Retsuko's narrative arcs, maturing past the idealism of youth and fully entering the adult world, which turns out to be a very narrowly defined futurity, the path of the middle class. According to anthropologist Allison, by the end of the 1980s, 90% of Japanese identified as middle class, but in the post-Fordist Japanese economy, the attainability of banal middle-class existence has become more difficult to achieve. Japan has moved from a society of an expansive middle class to one of class difference. What was once seen as within the grasp of most, steady employment, a family and home of one's own, material comfort, divides the nation now into winners and losers. And this division exists not only in reality, but in the imagination as well. Through the net animation, the audience is made to participate in Retsuko's daily struggles and sees her develop as a character. She has a history, ambitions, and even dreams. And all of this is foreclosed by her nature. She is, after all, the product of a merchandising company. She is specifically a karukuta, a mascot designed to adorn the merchandise sold by the company that owns her copyright, Sanrio. And this has been one aspect of their business model since the 1970s. The other aspect is Sanrio's leveraging of a commodified cuteness, kawaii. While the term has become quite ubiquitous, there is more to kawaii than an adorable nature, as noted by scholar Christine Yano. Kawaii outlines a particular gaze upon the world, including people and objects, that establishes a relational position of the gazer and gazed upon. Instead of an inherent quality of an object or person, kawaii is a model of regard. That is, by dubbing some object or person kawaii, the viewer proffers a gaze that is both softened and charged with empathy, intimacy, and emotion. If Retsuko is possessed of any quality, it is how eminently relatable, how empathetic she is, and it is through her kawaii affect that she becomes an object of endearment for the viewer. Not only this, but she manifests the spoken and unspoken travails of the consumers who see themselves in her outwardly cheerful but inwardly screaming character. Retsuko is a product designed to offer this catharsis, but through her net animation, she moves beyond a character giving voice to these frustrations, becoming a character who can also listen to and understand. When you scream into the void, she is what screams back. And, even if only for the smallest of moments, the consumer can find a balm for their souls through a character who isn't so much aspirational, but a reflection of the enemy that permeates every aspect of just trying to get by under late capitalism. Tadano is a major love interest for Retsuko and is introduced in Season 2, with a recurring role throughout the rest of the series. He's a really interesting character from a narrative standpoint, because he represents all of the immature wish fulfillments Retsuko possessed in Season 1. Initially appearing as a disinterested slacker, it is soon revealed that Tadano is the CEO of Freeride Incorporated and a tech billionaire. And it is in the wake of this revelation that Tadano and Retsuko start dating, and her childish dreams of running away from her awful job become legitimate options. Tadano is willing to take care of her material needs so that she can pursue whatever dreams she may have. There's just one obstacle standing in the way. Tadano is a radical anti-capitalist. A not insignificant amount of the media coverage Aggretsuko received in Western media centered on Season 2, and specifically the anti-capitalist soundbites issuing from Tadano, including the utterance of the phrase late-stage capitalism. Even beyond Tadano, the series is replete with antipathy directed towards the futility of the 9-to-5, the seeming impossibility of getting ahead in the contemporary reality of the Japanese economy. So what's the problem then? Retsuko's fundamental dilemma at the conclusion of Season 2 is that her vision of the future and Tadano's are not in sync. Retsuko wants a traditional marriage and to, eventually, have a family, whereas Tadano does not believe in the institution of marriage, and does not want children. Added to this is Retsuko's inability to imagine a future where she isn't working at her current job. When she is presented with the opportunity to do anything, she is simply paralyzed. Anthropologist Ofer Goldstein-Gidoni, writing on the development of Japanese domesticity in the post-bubble economy, outlines the underlying basis of Retsuko's unease. Marriage and childbearing are usually considered as the final, crucial steps for Japanese women to become full social persons, sakaijin, and wholly mature, ichininmei. If the thread which binds the net animation together is Retsuko maturing into adulthood, then it tracks that in a social milieu where the goal for women is to marry and become mothers, Retsuko's desires will ultimately reflect this. It should then be unsurprising that the character who reminds Retsuko that she wants different things than Tadano is not her coworkers, her friends, or even her parents. It's her boss, Tone, reprising his function as straight talker from Season 1. If having the manifestation of the patriarchal order be the character who convinces Retsuko of what she really wants seems a little ham-fisted, it is effectively obscured by weaving together earlier narrative threads which position this as her genuine aspiration for the future, a Goldstein-Gidoni again. Through this state power, which is often invisible, culturally dominated images and self-images are constructed through continuous suppression of alternatives coupled with active encouragement by state activities and agencies of preferred forms, which then become recognized and take it for granted as reality. So all of this makes complete sense. It is, after all, perfectly reasonable to want to get married and have children, because this is precisely how capitalism reinforces the status quo. The nuclear family is not, after all, a universal and timeless institution, but one which is necessary to reproduce existing class relations. Retsuko could never be happy with Tadano because her image of the future is wholly middle class. She cannot imagine a life beyond the endless everyday. Seasons 3 through 4 stray too far into wacky hijinks for this video. Retsuko briefly becomes an idol in Season 3, and Haida engages in some corporate malfeasance while finally dating Retsuko in Season 4. Moving on. As much as the idea of Retsuko being recruited to join a fringe political party and run for the Japanese House of Representatives is definitely in wacky hijinks territory, the events of Season 5 are an instructive capstone to the entire franchise. Towards the end of the season, a fringe political party, called the Party of Rage, led by Masuo Ikari, seeks to recruit Retsuko because his health is failing and she's a viral YouTube star he believes can be recruited to the cause. She rejects the very idea as absurd, but after some desperate attempts to bring her on board, Ikari conspires with OTM, her former idol group, to get Retsuko back on stage in front of an adoring crowd, and this is enough to push her to run. The complication is that her opponent will be Haida's brother, Jiro. As it turns out, the Haida family are part of a local political dynasty, and his father's failing health has necessitated that Jiro run in his place. So here you have the distillation of the Aggretsuko brand in narrative form. Retsuko, the enraged voice of the unfulfilled aspirations of a generation, running against the embodiment of nepotism, the son of the ruling class of Japanese politics. The final instrumentalization of Aggretsuko's politic of resentment, expressed through the media-saturated message of rock the vote. And it is only when Retsuko stops trying to emulate a respectable politician and releases her Rage Sona that she begins to gain electoral traction. What's stressed through all the politicking is the simple message that being angry at the system, being enraged by the status quo, is not only understandable, it's the necessary precondition to effecting any kind of progressive political change. The message is that the only way to change the system is to engage with it, which, as Dogrillard notes, is precisely the strategy of the state. Everywhere the masses are encouraged to speak, they are urged to live socially, electorally, organizationally, sexually, in participation, in festival, in free speech, etc. The specter must be conjured. It must pronounce its name. Nothing shows more dramatically that the only genuine problem today is the silence of the mass, the silence of the silent majority. This fear of silence is exemplified by Jiro's single outburst during the climax of the season, declaring his intention to introduce the Old Age Extermination Bill, triumphantly throwing off the fetters his father had placed upon him and becoming his own man. Of course, this very act signifies the immobility of the existing system. Is it worth mentioning that among the G7 countries, Japan consistently has the lowest rates of voter turnout? Jiro handedly wins the election, garnering over 57,000 more votes than Retsuko. And while the implication is that his display of growth was the reason for his electoral victory, the opposite is true. A lone junior representative has absolutely no path to changing anything. It is a completely empty gesture. The system will not be displaced, but as Baudrillard reflects, it needs to pretend that it is possible. Happily, the citizen still has the spectacle and the ironic enjoyment of that spectacle. For, If we are politically under house arrest, and if we cannot be the actors of politics, we must at least have the spectacle of politics. And that's what's so fascinating about the conclusion of this storyline. Not only does it end in Retsuko's electoral defeat, it's that what ought to be a damning indictment of the very idea of Japanese electoral politics is instead treated as a happy ending. Introduced as a supporting character in Season 5, Shikabane meets Haida through their time spent playing the MMORPG Aggressive Heroes. When Haida becomes unhoused, he ends up renting a booth in the Anagura internet cafe, which happens to be where Shikabane also resides. She shows him the ropes and helps him integrate into the Neto Cafe Nanmin, net cafe refugee, lifestyle. Originally coined by journalist Hiroaki Mizushima in a 2007 documentary, net cafe refugee referred to young people of no fixed abode who sleep in 24-hour internet cafes, the refugee appellation owing to their isolation and lack of hope for the future, which reminded him of an earlier experience of visiting a refugee camp. The term became so popular that the Japan Complex Cafe Association released an official statement requesting journalists no longer use the term. Related to this phenomenon is that of the irregular worker, or hiseikishain, a catch-all term for temporary, part-time, and dispatch workers. Shikabane, Dokichin, another net cafe refugee, and for at least a little while, Haida himself all work these precarious jobs, but as Haida soon learns, the cycle out of debt is nigh inescapable. And Allison explains. Feelings of ineptitude, isolation, and defeat are endemic, generating what Berardi sees as the two psychopathologies of post-Fordist times, panic and depression. Or, as Mollet puts it, this issue, also speaking of Italy, the intensifying vulnerability of workers can induce a zombie-like state of ghostliness, of feeling not precisely dead, but hardly alive. And as the season progresses, the competent and chill affect of Shikabane is gradually worn down. If she appeared disconnected when she enters in episode 2, she's totally checked out by the series finale. Of course, the show positions her as if she has willingly chosen this lifestyle, the chic life of the precariat. At no point is even a hint of introspection made as to how the phenomenon of net cafe refugees came about, but it's pretty simple. In late capitalism, everything can be monetized, even poverty and homelessness. So it should come as no surprise that there are entire industries which have benefited financially from the increasing rates of both. As laid out by sociologist Maya Yoshida, these new industries, such as one-night residences for the homeless, 24-hour manga or internet cafes, real estate agencies dealing in low-rent properties requiring no deposit, and others, rely on the existence of the functioning of a BOP, or bottom of the pyramid, in society. They grow in parallel with the poor population. It will be worth noting that among the G7 countries, Japan has the lowest reported rates of homelessness. But this is a very deceptive claim. You see, Japan counts as homeless only those individuals who are said to be sleeping rough, whereas in related jurisdictions, people who sleep in temporary shelters, 24-hour businesses, unsuitable, unsafe, or overcrowded structures, rooming houses, and so on, are included in those statistics. As Baudrillard denotes when talking about the end of the social, whence that piquancy of an expression like the responsibility of society vis-a-vis its underprivileged members, when we know the social is precisely the agency which arises from this dereliction. And this is why I find Shikabane such an interesting character, because she represents a genuine, possible, and real alternative to the middle-class life of the endless everyday that Retsuko reifies. And this alternative presented as being worse in every conceivable way. Baudrillard's words echo in the gradual deterioration of Shikabane's appearance as the season progresses. More commonly, We are in this way all hostages of the social. If you don't participate, if you don't manage your capital, money, health, desire, if you're not social, you destroy yourself. It is also worth noting that at this point in the series, Tadano, presented as the radical alternative to normalcy, decides on a whim to purchase the Anagura internet cafe and to transform it into his personal residence, effectively removing it as an option for shelter for countless refugees. Class trumps ideology every time, kids. The resolution to Shikabane's arc is that happy ending I alluded to at the end of the last chapter. While Retsuko loses the election, Haida has one last person who he really needs to hear her message, and that's Shikabane.
Is it worth noting that people without permanent addresses are ineligible to vote?
Meeting within the sacred precincts of the karaoke lounge, Shikabane is finally given license, given a voice with which to scream at the world, and it is Retsuko who listens, who becomes the sounding board for Shikabane's grievances. And after this, we can see Shikabane looking for an apartment to rent.
Does it matter that some landlords require a 6-month deposit before signing a lease?
As long as Retsuko was able to reach Shikabane, able to crack her detached and disinterested facade, to get her engaged and on the proper track to the exhausting but stable grind, then the effort of the election had been worth it. As much as the net animation develops Retsuko as a character, affords her a great deal of subjecthood, and pushes her through multiple story arcs, she will never be able to escape the function she serves. She is a product. She is a commodity, and so her future is already foreclosed. Any subversive, let alone radical messaging, has always already been reified as justification for the sociocultural conditions which enabled her creation to begin with. Anti-capitalism as engaging, meaningful critique has always already been accounted for and reabsorbed by the system, as explained by writer Thomas Frank. Now products existed to facilitate our rebellion against the soul-deadening world of products, to put us in touch with our authentic selves, to distinguish us from the mass-produced herd, to express our outrage at the stifling world of economic necessity. If the shorts and first few seasons instrumentalized the banal message of take this job and shove it in the service of Kawaii Catharsis, and the middle seasons focused on character-driven drama and wacky plots, then the 5th season leveraged both to provide an effective lesson about the limitations of critique. The subversive messaging of work sucks, your coworkers are annoying, your boss is a misogynist, and capitalism will crush your soul are all characterized as youthful idealisms, gradually replaced with the appeal of settling, the allure of the endless everyday. It's the mature, grown-up thing to do. Yes, your job does suck, but at least you have steady and reliable employment. Yes, your coworkers are annoying, but when push comes to shove, they have your back. Yes, your boss is a misogynist, but he's going to give it to you straight and never coddle you. Yes, capitalism sucks, but you don't have to let it destroy your soul. You have options. Start a YouTube channel. Become an idol. Date the guy who's crushing you who's been an open secret for 4 seasons and he's finally worn you down. You are only limited by your resistance to being integrated into the system. After all,
tomorrow is a new day.